FPL Game Week 19 transfer targets. Game Week 18 is almost over and we have just a 2-day turnaround to go until the Game Week 19 deadline. So today, I'm going to take you through some of those top transfer targets, those players in FPL that you need to be buying into your teams. We've seen suspensions ranking up. We've seen injuries to highly owned players like Tsimikas. So today, it is those players that you need to be buying into your FPL teams for Game Week 19. Welcome back everyone, FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 1,000 likes on the videos there and subscribe if you are new around here. The data taken from all of these videos, these transfer targets videos, is taken from Fantasy Football Scout. They are still offering Christmas discounts and long-term memberships. If you do want to sign up, there is a link in the description below. But starting off with some of those highly owned players who I still think are good players to buy into your teams, but I can't recommend them in these videos just because it would be, a little bit boring for me to tell you to buy these same players every single week. First up is Cole Palmer. Now, be wary, I'm recording, of course, before the Chelsea-Wolves game. Cole Palmer is currently on 4 yellow cards. If he gets booked against Wolves, he will be suspended going into Game Week 19. Ollie Watkins is next. They blanked against Sheffield United, but the fixtures coming up are still good. Aston Villa are still a top side. I still think, for me, he's the second best forward in FPL, only behind that of Erling Haaland. However, another top forward in FPL that we definitely need to continue to look at. He's been in my transfer targets videos, I think, for about 2 months now. Finally, people are starting to realise quite how good he is as a footballer and as an FPL asset at the price he is, and that is Dominic Solanke. 6.9 million he is now. Again, Bournemouth look good. Fulham at home this week. Nice fixtures coming up. Still an asset to buy. And then it is Pedro Porro. A late clean sheet wipeout for Spurs in this game doesn't mean that I think he or Spurs are a bad team or a bad asset going forward. So still, if you are looking for a defender, we'll talk about some defenders in here. But if you are considering Pedro Porro, I still like him. Now, Salah and Son have come off the transfer targets list despite them both scoring in Game Week 18. Of course, because they only have 2 more game weeks to go before they leave to the African Cup of Nations and to the Asia Cup respectively. So if you are considering Salah, you are considering Son, I don't think it's worth the transfer to buy them and to sell them in 2 weeks. The big talking point this week, and I'll talk more about him in my team selection video tomorrow, and that is Erling Haaland. He put up this dubious post of him training without any shoes on with a sort of hourglass loading emoji as the only caption. We've heard from Pep that he hasn't been training with the squad so far, so for me, he still remains a reasonable, pretty big doubt going into Game Week 19. Personally, I wouldn't be buying him going into Game Week 19 unless we have more concrete news of him being available for that Everton game. I know some people disagree. I know some people think that he's just been rested. Yes, he had a little bit of a knock, but he's going to be back for that. If that's your decision and that's the way you feel, then go for it. But my personal feeling is he won't be back for Game Week 19. Now, it's worth me clarifying, I can't buy Haaland this week unless it's for a -4, unless I sell Son against Brighton or I go and sell Salah against Burnley. So I don't want him to be back. I can't buy him, but I do think that it might come too soon for him. Now, next up is highly transferred in players. A lot of people are buying that you should be avoiding in your teams, right? Those highly sought after players to avoid. Remaining on this list are those players going away to the African Cup of Nations and to the Asia Cup. The 2 most bought players this week that fall into that category are Kudus of West Ham, who scored again, and Son of Spurs, who scored again. For me, it is still, again, too short notice when they only have 2 more game weeks before they go away to go and be buying them into your team. There are other Spurs midfielders like Richarlison, like Brennan Johnson, maybe like Kulusevski as well, who I'd prefer to bring into my team. The only thing that's worth bearing in mind with the Richarlison is he did pick up a slight back injury in the Game Week 8 fix. He did have to get subbed off early, but we have heard from Ange Postecoglou that it does sound like it's going to be okay. And the other one is Julian Alvarez. Now, he looked great. Of course, he scored in the Club World Cup, scored twice actually in the final of that game. However, Haaland is nearing a return. Whether it's in Game Week 19, Game Week 20 or 21, we know Haaland is almost back. And we also know that Kevin De Bruyne is almost back. Alvarez's minutes have been so secure in the Premier League so far this season because of Kevin De Bruyne. With Haaland and De Bruyne coming back, we cannot be certain that Alvarez is going to continue to start in that Manchester City team. So I definitely wouldn't be buying him this week. Now, this video is going to talk a lot about Arsenal. First up, players to buy are defenders. Arsenal's fixtures over the next 4 are some of, if not the best fixture run over the next 4 out of teams that we expect to be invested in. West Ham, Fulham, Crystal Palace and Nottingham Forest, 2 at home, 2 away in that run. If you already own an Arsenal defender, great. I already own Gabriel. I benched Gabriel this week and it hasn't gone well. Of course, he got that goal yesterday against Liverpool, wiping out my Trent Alexander-Arnold clean sheet. But still great assets. If you have one, it is worth considering going and buying a second. They are statistically the best defence in the league so far this season. Clean sheets have been a little bit here and there over the past few weeks, but they still are the best defence. If you do not have an Arsenal defender, ignore everything else in this video and prioritize buying an Arsenal defender into your team. Now, the question is, who do you go and buy? For me, there are 3 real options, but I actually only think there are 2 real options to go and buy. In goal, if you are looking for a goalkeeper, David Raya is a great option. He's only 4.9 million. He's actually cheaper than the 5 million price tag he started the season with. If you have a goalkeeper issue and you want to make a switch, definitely think that David Raya is the #1 goalkeeper to buy in FPL. And he's a pretty set and forget option. It's worth noting that in game week 26, when there is likely to be a blank game week caused by the Carabao Cup final, Newcastle against Arsenal is the fixture that week. With Newcastle being knocked out of the cup by Chelsea, Arsenal can now no longer have a blank in that week. So that is a good thing if you're buying David Raya or Arsenal players as well. In defence, there are 2 real options. You've got Gabriel and you've got Zinchenko. For me, Saliba's not worth 5.5 million over Gabriel. For me, Gabriel is just the best one to go and buy. He's been good. He's got that goal threat as we saw at the weekend. Zinchenko is probably better for baseline bonus points. If Gabriel doesn't score, then Zinchenko is likely to outscore him. However, Zinchenko is more of a liability defensively. We know that. We've seen him be dropped. We've seen him be rotated more when Tomiyasu is available. Right now, Tomiyasu is not available, so Zinchenko is slightly more secure. So if you want to take a bit more of a risky, high reward punt, Zinchenko is probably that guy. However, if I was recommending a defender to buy this week, #1 would be Gabriel. I just don't think at 5.5 million, Saliba is worth the extra value on top of him. Following on at Arsenal, we've actually skipped the midfielders because Saka continues to disappoint, continues to be an issue in my team. Odegaard is not returning consistently. Havertz just picked up his 5th yellow card. Martinelli has been way off it this season. And actually, the only one I feel like who consistently is playing well, whether from an FPL point of view, but more from a footballing point of view, is Gabriel Jesus. He's 8 million as a forward, and he's still very low owned at just 5.2%. Do think he can do well over the next few games. He has had a lower number of minutes so far this season as he was out with a reasonable injury, but still 3 goals, 2 assists for him so far this season, and the underlying data is still pretty good as well. With those fixtures over the next 4, he could definitely do well. However, we did talk about a couple of other forwards in Dominic Solanke and in Ollie Watkins. For me, Gabriel Jesus is probably below those 2, but if you are fancying not going for them because Watkins blanked or the Solanke fixtures after this week are a little bit more difficult, Jesus is probably the #1 Arsenal attacker that I would recommend buying into your team this week. Moving away from Arsenal, Trent Alexander-Arnold. I brought him in for a -4 this week for Kostas Tsimikas and it has already paid off. He is looking back to his best. His creativity is off the charts. He almost scored against Arsenal as well. How he didn't finish that would have been a massive differential return for me. Could have really done with that, given I've got 26 points on my bench this week. More to talk about that in my team selection video tomorrow. But yeah, Trent is still a big differential. There is a lot of money that you need to go invest in him, right? He is 8.3, the most expensive defender in the game. But right now, with Saka not performing, with Son and Salah going away to their international tournaments, with Haaland still being a doubt about whether he's going to be available, a lot of us have money in the bank, which is why I bought him in. The upcoming fixtures are not bad as well. 3 of the next 6 are still pretty decent. But you know you're buying Trent for not only the clean sheets, which we can get, but it is the attacking returns as well. With Tsimikas picking up that injury, it does mean that Trent is likely to take more set pieces than maybe he was already doing as well. So he is a lot. He is a bit of a differential. Maybe Arsenal is a safer route, but the attacking threat that Trent adds means he's definitely got to be one to consider for us. Now, moving into midfield, I mentioned earlier, don't go and buy Kudus. Go and buy the other West Ham goal scorer at the moment in Jarrod Bowen. Currently the 3rd highest scoring player in the Premier League, only behind Erling Haaland and Mo Salah, who of course are over 12 million in price each. Jarrod Bowen coming in at just 7.8%, still in less than 1 in 4 teams as well. The upcoming fixtures are a little bit mixed. They do go away to Arsenal this week, which is not ideal. But if you are looking for a midfielder this week, don't be put off by that fixture because from game week 20 onwards, he is going to be one of the most highly transferred in midfielders in the game. I said it before we played Manchester United in game week 18 as well. Don't be put off by the short-term fixtures because West Ham are scoring goals and they're able to score goals against pretty much any team that they're playing against. So don't go and buy someone else who you like less just because he has a difficult fixture for 1 week. The fixtures after this week are definitely fixtures that we think West Ham can go and score goals in, and Bowen is focal to that, right? 7.8 million. Yes, when Kudu comes back from the African Cup of Nations, we might look to go back there. But right now, Jarrod Bowen at his price is a phenomenal asset. And a cheaper midfielder who I've been quite unfavourable to over the past, well, actually so far this season, but continues to get returns and is continuing to be amazing for bonus points as well, is Douglas Luiz of Aston Villa. 5.5 million, 7.2% selected, and the fixtures coming up now for them are pretty good. Burnley and Sheffield United, they're two best fixtures in the next 6, but also, Manchester United, Everton, Newcastle in there. Being at home to Newcastle versus going away to them so far this season seems like a massive difference, which is why they're a grey fixture here compared to a red fixture if they were going to go away to them. Still think that Cole Palmer is probably a better asset if he doesn't pick up the 5th yellow card in the Wolves game. But if you are looking for a second cheap defender, the Newcastle fixtures over the next few are very difficult after the Forest game this week, which means if you have Anthony Gordon, he's fine to hold. But it's maybe not be the time to go and buy Anthony Gordon. And I really like Douglas Luiz as a bit of a differential option, given how consistent he is. He's on penalties as well, just 5.5 million. And finally, my top 3 differentials, so 2 of which remain at Chelsea. We've heard from Pochettino that Nkunku is very unlikely to start that Wolves game in game week 18 on the 24th, so today, later today at time of uploading. Crystal Palace, Luton and Fulham in the next 3 though. As a Chelsea fan, I think his start is coming. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts that Crystal Palace at home game. The reason he's a differential, the reason he's a punt, is because we aren't guaranteed starts. However, Chelsea looked better against Newcastle in the Cup when he came on. If you're going to buy him, keep an eye on how he does, of course, in that Wolves game. But up front, if you're looking for a bit of a differential, if you're not necessarily set on Watkins, on Solanke, you don't want to go with Gabriel Jesus, you're not certain on his goal scoring, then I really like Nkunku as a differential. Elsewhere in Chelsea, I do like Levi Colwill as a solid option in defence, but an attacking route into the defence is Gusto. We have seen Reece James have surgery for Chelsea, likely to rule him out until at least the end of February, probably into March, with how cautious Chelsea will be when he returns from injury. 4.1 million for Gusto could be a great differential. We don't have any other fullbacks because Cucurella has also just had to have surgery on an injury. So right now, Gusto seems like he should be starting. Again, keep an eye on the Chelsea lineup today to make sure that's the case before buying him before Crystal Palace in game week 19. And finally, a midfielder. We've spoken about Son. We've spoken about Richarlison and Kulusevski recently. Richarlison should be fine, but Brennan Johnson at 5.8 million could be a cheaper alternative. 2 assists for him this week in game week 18, plus nice coming up fixtures as well. He's pretty much guaranteed to start at the moment. Plus when Son goes, that likelihood of starting just goes through the roof even more as well. So I really like him as a cheap differential. Again, Cole Palmer versus Douglas Luiz versus Gordon versus Johnson. They're all in and around the same price. They're all in and around the same potential to return. Cole Palmer may be the favourite, but Brennan Johnson and that Spurs team look more consistent every week than Chelsea. Brennan Johnson, when he plays, is very focal to what they're doing at the moment as well. So we've spoken from defence midfielders to forwards, some highly owned players, some low owned players as well. We'll be back again tomorrow with my team selection to tell you what I'm going to do with my team going into game week 19. Thank you all so much for watching. 1,000 likes on the videos, DM, subscribe if you are new around here as well, and I'll be back again very soon.